she'd been toiling over the oven all day, slaving away to cook the perfect dinner for her husband. Lately, they'd been having marital problems, and she hoped against hope that tonight would put them on the track to recovery. Beads of sweat began to form on her brow, creating an itch. She grabbed a stained blue dishcloth and wiped it away. The hands on the clock met their hour and chimed 6 bells. She turned the stove off to allow the food to cool and began to set the table. She'd laid out all the good china, polished silverware, and a very expensive bottle of Merlot aged precisely 80 years. Just as she finished, her husband walked through the door. He bore an angry look that assured her that he'd had a bad day. "Look, honey," she rushed to him. "I've made us a special dinner." She motioned to the table with a flourish. On it sat sausages, potatoes, a brothy stew, mincemeat pies, and other various types of steamed vegetables. His look of surprise brought a smile to her face and a feeling of accomplishment to her chest. "What's all this for?" he asked, suspicious. "I was hoping we could enjoy a meal together. It's been a while." She pulled a chair out and motioned for him to sit. Once he had, she began to rub his shoulders tenderly. "Things have been so bad between us lately, and I just want everything to be okay again." He sighed deeply, then grabbed her hand and kissed it. "I know, love," he whispered. "I want that too." She smiled sadly, though he couldn't see. I moved to sit down. "Well," she said, chipper, "I didn't spend all day making leftovers. Let's eat." She smiled again, more sincere, and put a big serving of each dish on his plate, filling it up completely. He smiled up at her, a faint blush rising to his cheeks. "Darling, there's no way I'll be able to eat all of this." She chuckled at him. "Then eat what you can. I wanted you to have all the best pieces." She served herself an equally abundant plate, and without further hesitation, the two began to stuff themselves. By the time they'd finished, the sausages, pies, and vegetables had gone completely. All that remained was half a bottle of wine and about a third of the stew. She picked at her teeth with a toothpick, while her husband sat rubbing his belly and suppressing gases of all types. She stood up and poured them both another glass of wine and set about cleaning the table. "That was marvelous, darling," he gushed. "I'd forgotten you could cook so well." Back turned to him. She turned to the sink and filled it with soap. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. I worked terribly hard on it." Abandoning the plates to let them soak, she sat back down across from him. "I was hoping we could talk, dear, about—" she started. "You're right," he interrupted with a raised hand. "We should talk." He looked up at her, eyes filled with regret. He forced himself to hold her gaze. "I know things haven't been the same since you found out about her." He wouldn't dare mention her name. "And I want you to know that I never loved her. Things between us were a mistake, proof to my weak character, and I don't expect to ever be able to make it up to you." "No, you can't," she replied with tears budding in her eyes. "It was an absolute betrayal of my trust and of our love." He opened his mouth to speak, but she continued ahead of him. "But, after long contemplation, I've decided that I still love us. Love you." He sighed again, relief flooding from his chest. "I promise you will not regret this," he exclaimed. "I want no part in her life, hers or that damned baby's." He started to raise his voice and pounded his fist on the table. "I'll make sure they both know it," he heaved. "My love," she replied calmly, hand relaxing on his. "I've already made sure of that for us." He looked up at her, confusion in his eyes. "You've spoken with her?" "Well," she began, "I tried. She would not believe that you wanted nothing more to do with her, and the bastard. She told me you proposed to her only the night before." His eyes widened. He'd been caught. "No, my sweet, you must believe that isn't true." "I confronted her, of course," she said, "and she showed me her ring." He hung his head low and sighed. "My love, he started. "We fought after that, I ran into her home and grabbed her meat hammer. She stared blankly ahead, no emotion on her face. She tried to stop me, but I got her. He looked up at her in horror, face flushed with fear. Could his slight wife really have attacked another woman? He began to tremble. What did you do after? She looked at him and smiled lovingly. I cleaned up, came home, and made you dinner. The sink was overflowing now, emptying the contents of the stew pot. Out came vegetables, chunks of meat, and a few small bones. Unable to take his eyes off the bones, he spoke. Honey, what was in the soup? She got up and walked to the sink, still pouring water all over the floor. She picked up the pot and dumped it on the floor, spilling the contents. A small jawbone plummeted to the ground, and he vomited at the realization. He stood up, grabbed her shoulders, and shook her violently. "Where's the baby?" he screamed, sending spit flying across her face. "She was too small for the soup," she said, wiping spit from her eyes. "I thought she'd be better for the pies." Hey everybody, it's Storm. Thank you so much for listening to my scary story, The Way to a Man's Heart. I hope you enjoyed it and it was nice and creepy. I tried something new with sound effects. I don't know if it came out well. I hope it did. I figured since it's Halloween, maybe I would try and give you guys a little bit of spook. Anyways, if you like it, like, comment, share, subscribe, do the YouTube thing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.